So good afternoon, good people in the audience. We have now breached the graveyard shift. So I want to be assured that all of you are there in the audience. Now I can't see you because I would have you do jumping jacks. In fact, you could probably do a few for me. And I'm just going to take your word that you're doing it. Because I want to know you're awake. So I can see smiling, happy faces. I guess that's going to be a yes for you're awake. Okay, so we have with us some really great panelists this afternoon, and we are going to be talking about the skills in supply chain management. It's an area that I'm really passionate about, as are my esteemed panelists. So I'm not going to introduce them. I'm going to let them do their own introductions, and then they can tell you all about who they are, what they do, and what they want you to know about them, rather than the other way around. One of our panelists is currently in an Uber, and he will be joining us shortly. So that's going to be interesting, and we'll see how that works out. So I'm going to start with LERATO. You just tell us a bit about yourself.
Sanbanani, hello everybody. I'm LERATO THABEDE. I am a supply chain practitioner who is very, very passionate about supply chain and even more passionate about getting young people like yourselves into this wonderful career that is supply chain. I am certified in production and inventory management. Sorry, it's changed. I'm certified in planning and inventory management, as well as logistics, transport, and distribution. I've got a BCom honors in logistics. I run my own business called Deffinity Training Solutions, where I train people, more especially young people, in the field of supply chain. And I'm very eager and blessed to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Tonya.
Thank you, LERATO. Did you see Abe's face there when you got the CPIN wrong?
I did.
Okay, Abe, we're going to go with your introduction next.
Thank you, Tonya. Pleasure to be with everybody virtually, if hopefully soon in person. I'm Abe ESHKENAZI, currently the CEO for ASCM, the Association for Supply Chain Management. I've been with the organization way too long, but more importantly, what I've been through is a transformation of supply chain professionals. We had always hoped that the general public and patients and consumers alike would understand what supply chain was all about. I don't think we would have preferred that it come through the pandemic. I think we would have preferred that understanding and appreciating the impact that supply chain has would be for the benefit that it has. But we're focused on enabling individuals to not only contribute to their organization, but to have a career in supply chain and make a difference. And we truly believe that we can make a difference in the world through supply chain. And it's on everybody's topic list today, from boardrooms to kitchen tables, which are often the same today. So our focus, not only on the individual, but on ensuring that supply chains are sustainable economically, ethically, and environmentally. And our focus through the individuals, we've got 45,000 members across the globe. Looking forward to not only this discussion, but engaging our young professionals.
Thank you so much, Abe. Justin, over to you.
Thank you very much. My name's Justin DRENNAN. I'm not a supply chain expert by any means. I'm actually originally a software development engineer who ended up being in supply chain due to some bad life decisions. No, I'm joking. In supply chain because we were involved in a number of e-commerce ventures and businesses, and one of the key challenges around e-commerce was actually the supply chain management process. And being a lazy software developer, we went about building software to make our lives easier from a supply chain perspective. And that started about 15 years ago. We've worked with probably 150 different companies, ranging from Walmart to all sorts of others. And our job is to sort of help improve supply chain through tech. And that's how I ended up in this space.
And you made a good decision. It wasn't a bad life decision. It was a good decision.
Went left instead of right. It was, in a forest, the two paths.
Nothing wrong with that. Okay, so I am going to start with LERATO. Tell me, LERATO, what skills are needed for the future that we do not have now?
That's a very simple answer, Tonya. Supply chain skills. So I want to expand on that. I want to first start and say we need individuals, right? And we need individuals that come in with their own uniqueness and their own ability to understand and be aware of themselves and be aware of the environment and the world that keeps revolving and keeps changing. So we need the innovators. So we need innovative people that will come in. We need people, I mean, Abe has mentioned that, supply chain is known now because of COVID. Just because we are known now, it doesn't mean that people still understand what it is that we do. So we need to be able to understand what it is that we do and coming with those innovative techniques. How do we spread the work that we do? How do we plan more efficiently? And how do we enable more efficiently? So those are the type of skills I would say are really, really forthcoming in, the future that we don't see now. So yes, we keep saying that word innovative, sustainability, but do we really see those skills? So as young people that are sitting out there, when you wanting to sell yourself and you're wanting to get into this career, looking forward into the future, how more innovative can this supply chain be? How more innovative can we be in the world? And that's that thinking, that futuristic thinking that millennials possess, that I'm not scared of doing anything. And those are the type of skills that we are looking for when we talk about the supply chain of the future.
Thank you, LERATO. So on the back of that, Abe, I think that fits in somewhat with the question for you. What responsibilities have been added to the role of supply chain professionals? Because, the skill set is changing, but so are the job roles and their outputs. So how does that tie in, and what are your thoughts on that?
No, and I think I'll build on what LERATO's pointing out, is that it used to be that technical skills were sufficient. That if you knew your quantitative, if you knew how to coordinate and align your manufacturing, sourcing, all the logistics in the back office, that used to be enough. Now, those are the foundational skills. Now you need to add communication. Now you need to add collaboration and coordination of activities, because we deal with a supply chain that's rarely a single source or a single distribution channel. You have multiple sourcing, multiple distribution channels, which creates complexity. And so therefore, communication and coordinating these activities across time zones, across cultures, has become a new hallmark. Add to that the challenge on resiliency and the disruptions that we've been facing, whether it's the pandemic or the Suez Canal, geopolitical, environmental challenges. These are now part of the primary responsibilities of supply chain professionals. So while the focus is on meeting consumers' and patients' expectations, what we're now focused on with supply chain professionals is not only the disruptions, but ensuring that we do so sustainably. It's easy to take the shortcut or the easy path to meet our consumers and patients. The UN Global Report on Sustainability and the impact that supply chain has on our environment now is part of every supply chain professional's dialogue and responsibility. We're seeing this only expand. We're not seeing less responsibility being added on to supply chain professionals, which begs the question, are they prepared for the role and responsibilities that they have today versus where we were 5 years ago?
Yeah, and the question is, I don't think so. I think we've had massive change, and I think that supply chain professionals have really been in the trenches trying to, muddle their way out of everything that's been thrown at them. And I think that the supply chains that we know or knew will be forever changed. And so what do those people look like? Ken, it's great to have you join us. Do you want to do a quick introduction to yourself there? We've done an introduction for everybody else, but we'd love to hear from you.
Great, Tonya. Thank you, and apologies, everybody. Just off to a client function here in Dubai, even though it's a weekend. But look, quick 30 seconds from me, which would be unusual. But 22 years ago, I started this business in Australia. We're in 12 cities around the world, global search firm, specifically logistics and supply chain. We also have a corporate advisory business, mergers and acquisitions, and supply chain transformation. who runs some non-for-profits in Africa actually as well. So yeah, look, pleased to join you all. We've been up here in lockdown now in the city of open borders in Dubai now for the last 2 years. Supply chain and logistics business is booming off the rocks, and I hope to talk a little bit about opportunities and employment very shortly.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to jump to you. I feel like I'm jumping a little bit all over the place here. So Kim, talk to me or tell me more about the current trends you are seeing in terms of what characteristics and strengths employers are looking for in the talent they're seeking to source. And I think especially where we are in terms of the supply chain now, those must have changed.
Well, thanks, Tonya, and hi, everybody in the audience and the other panelists. Thanks for having me join you. So, look, this is the busiest year that Logistics Executive Group, as I said, specialists in logistics and supply chain. It's all we do, and the executive search firm, which I'm very tactile with, across the board, deal with all of the major clients myself, with my other 20 consultants. But look, really what's happening is COVID, as we probably heard amongst the other panelists, is off the hook in terms of logistics and supply chain. We've become the industry, logistics and supply chain have become the heroes of the global economies. We're out of the shadows for the first time in the 50-odd years I've been in the industry. And it's all on. And there's zero talent available in many markets. We're in a deficit in many, many markets. So the good news for the folks, for all of the students and all the youngsters who are with us in the audience, is this is the right place to be. This is the right time to be there. If there's got to be a silver lining to this catastrophe that struck mankind, we are right in it. We're in the vortex. And I can tell you it's extremely encouraging. We do a lot of work here throughout APAC, India, Russia, Africa and Europe with young people. We specialise in senior executive roles, but we also do a lot of pro bono work. And what I'm seeing is that the talents and the capabilities and the attitudes that the youngsters, millennials, Z generation have got is right where clients need to be looking. So the old issue of skills and experience and 20 years of this and that, frankly, are out the door. And this is what's happening right inside our own business, which is right there. Actually, I'm just driving past it. So that's Studio City here in Dubai, which is the Hollywood of Dubai. And we happen to be there. But, you know, what we're finding is it's attitude. You know, a lot of kids and a lot of youngsters, young students and young people, anyone below 25, isn't having the experience right now. They're not getting the interns. They're not getting the overseas experience. A lot of us Kiwis and Australians and South Africans had when we were young. So employers have got to buck up. They've got to own up and step up and say, hey, young people aren't getting the opportunities they would normally have got in the last 24 months in particular. We've got to give them a crack. We've got to give people an opportunity to come and improve what they can do, to learn, adapt, and become aggressive about the market and what's going on. So for me, it's not so much skills, it's attitude. Excuse me one moment. Boss, you're going the wrong way. Straight. Okay, sorry, just about hit something. Boss, we're going to Marina. Sorry about that. So
we've all been in
action logistics here.
Another Kim.
You can go this way. Here's the street. So yeah, that's what we're seeing, and that's what we're propagating, and it's what we're pushing with our clients is give people an opportunity, give young people that window to be able to show what they can do. And you know what? Our experience is they're getting up and doing it.
So I think that, you know, in terms of the young professionals and the students coming into the space, you know, supply chain has changed so much, and there's so much new innovation and creativity that needs to be happening that, you know, there's no kind of rigid set of skills in terms of technically that they need to have. They need to come in with new ideas and innovative thoughts on how they can change supply chains and add value and make them better. So that's definitely something that you can look forward to with the youngsters.
So I'll just jump in there, Tonya, and jump on that. Look, what's happening is we've seen the whole pattern, consumer patterns have gone out the window. Everything's changed. Everybody's doing stuff from home for health reasons, and obviously they can't get out. Many countries, like the lockdown kingdoms in Australia and New Zealand, God help them, just everybody's having to buy from home, and patterns are really changing. What this has meant is, as we all know, the e-commerce world has exploded. We're talking massive growth and development. The whole cyclical economy around including returns and fulfillment centres, postal. I mean, we're working with 17 postal groups around the world currently on recruitment. And the reason for that is because post offices had to get their act together and catch up to buying patterns from consumers. So what this has meant, great opportunities. Guess what people under 25 are very good at? Playing with these devices, being born into a digital world and seeing things in virtual reality. And that is what's happening with the world of logistics and economy and supply chain to a large degree. Not totally, of course. What we're also seeing is massive demand in some of the really big carrier areas. Some of our biggest clients are in the ocean and air carrier area, and everybody's short of talent. So my advice to young talent is get in any way you possibly can. Go and work for free if you have to. Get an internship. Volunteer your services, because if you're good at what you're doing, you've got the right attitude, people will give you a job.
Thank you, Kim. So back on the back of the e-commerce part of that discussion, Justin, I'm going to come to you because that's kind of your area of expertise, and I want to learn from you more about what are the characteristics of the people that you are seeing succeed in that space. What have your experiences been like?
Thanks. I mean, we run probably the biggest fulfillment center for e-commerce in Africa and have been involved in e-commerce for a number of years, both cross-border and local. And I think what's been interesting for us is that the individuals that we work quite well with and have been involved with within our organization are the people that are multidisciplinary. So I think that this hyper-focus or hyper-specialization, again, the saying is that specialization is for insects, I think is the saying. And I think that just maybe touching on what Kim was saying there is that individuals need to be multidisciplinary in understanding not just supply chain, but what's happening from a broader perspective, both from an economic perspective, individuals, technologies that are out there. So it doesn't help you to be a supply chain expert, because what does that mean? It's changing. I think what we're seeing is this adaptability is the biggest thing. So they talk about like survival of the fittest. It's not survival of the fittest. It's survival of the most adaptable. And that's what's critical in this space. And for us, individuals who have a breadth of knowledge across multi-disciplines seem to do quite well or do well in our organization. And we're probably not your typical sort of fulfillment center, and that we do things slightly differently, or we do things with a heavy tech focus, if I could say that, and build technology ourselves. So we're looking for the people that form part of this combination or straddle this tech together with supply chain is where we're seeing things. So being able to think innovatively, and by having a tech background, or to be able to think differently, if I can call it that, enables you to do things that you never thought were possible. And just from my background, being a software developer, just having that in my toolkit, enables me to do things or think a bit differently to how the traditional supply chain guys have thought about things. And that forward-looking tech angle, I think like Kim was saying around the willing to do things, those are the sort of individuals that we work with. And I think Abe touched on something earlier, which is like there's a, I'm not going to call it a civic duty, but there's now a requirement from the supply chain to step into the limelight for a change. I mean, we've been in tech and supply chain. Everyone always gave a shit about us because of tech. Suddenly now there's like, oh, use tech and supply chain, our business is acquired. And I think that the learnings there is those two components with tech and supply chain, where they come together synergistically, is where there are opportunities that we're seeing unfold at the moment. So I think that for us is the sort of place that we see the individuals having that would be complementary to what we do, if we could say that, especially in e-commerce.
Thank you, Justin. So on the back of, the youngsters and the changing face of supply chain management with the bringing in of the tech side, which is really interesting, because they've always seemed to have that separate kind of like, no man should cross that bridge. I think it's the same with marketing, although it shouldn't be. So multi-skilled in a variety of disciplines. LERATO, in terms of the millennials and the skill set that they can bring, especially with their hunger for the technological side, it's kind of what they do without even thinking about it. What are your thoughts?
So I'm not going to give away my age because I am still young. But when I started in supply chain, I was still manually labeling boxes, right? I was still manually writing a invoice. So I'm very young, but I was still back in those days. And as the generations move along, and as we move as well as young people, we come in with this mind of, I'm sure we can do this better. Right? The millennials have got an advantage of being so technologically savvy that they can create applications on their cell phones at the moment right now. As we're speaking, somebody could be saying, this is a great idea, and then they create an app that creates an invoice. So bringing that in, bringing their futuristic thinking, so looking at forward, because they're more about questioning what happens versus just taking orders from, as the generations go along. We went from, I say do it and do it like this, to can we do it better, to them saying, but this can be done in a different way. So they bring that approach, and allowing young people to bring that approach. And also young people yourselves, you need to, I think Kim had mentioned that you need to have that hunger. So when you have that hunger, you come in with that technological thing, that technological vision. The Zulu is coming, and I don't want the Zulu to come out, but with the technological thinking to say, guys, I'm sure there's an easier way for us to do this. The looting that has happened has just shown us, the looting in South Africa that has happened has also shown us that traceability is still very backward here in South Africa. If you remember, there's a blue couch. We've got a famous blue couch. If you guys haven't heard about it, there was a famous blue couch that was tracked to a township somewhere in KZN. But from a traceability point of view, if it wasn't that Instagram picture or that post that somebody did, that couch would have never been traced. So that easy technology as to when I'm sitting here doing my work, whether I'm a merchandiser, whether I'm a cashier, because we're all not going to be planners, we're not going to be supply chain executives. We're going to work in different aspects within the supply chain, especially as we enter. We're not entering straight into management, right? So as I'm sitting as a merchandiser, how can I make what I'm doing better? Is there an idea that I can bring upon? Is there something that I've seen that can change the way that we work, change the way that we track things, change the way that we look at sustainability, change how we look at how we apply ourselves into supply chain? I've had the privilege of working with young people in the Eastern Cape on a project. It's an ASCM project where they trained on supply chain skills. And to see them finally understand that regardless of whatever they study, they are supply chain practitioners. I often use an example of when you're going to cook, you are a supply chain practitioner because you do planning, you do sourcing, you manufacture, you deliver, you return, and you enable, all in that cooking, right? So I bring that example on. And there was one who came back to me and said, look, LERATO, I'm a musician, and you've just shown me how I can apply supply chain in music. So for me, it's that thinking of how, instead of traditionally, this is plan, make, do, this is how I can apply it in the different aspects of supply chain. So for me, supply chain is the career because it is across board. You can be in marketing and you can be a supply chain practitioner. You can be in finance and you are doing supply chain. So how do we bring in that thinking as to looking at what new can we bring in, what technologies are there, what social media things can we do to put that into our organization, and entrepreneurship if we can. There's a big gap, so let's fill that in. I think I've said a mouthful. So yeah.
That was an awful lot. I need to find a way to just mute you guys when you go over time. but it's okay. Okay, so Abe, I'm gonna come across to you now. So you really are in a difficult situation to some extent, because you're kind of setting the standard and the pace for what it is that supply chain management education or skills should look like. And with all these rapid changes and the changes of the youngsters coming in with the technology, et cetera, how do you see that impacting on how the material is developed and the changes of the way that these youngsters come in and learn? I mean, we already have a crippling skills challenge in supply chain management. With all the changes that are happening now and the bringing in of more advanced technology, what do you see is going to happen?
A really interesting question, because the discussion here, I think, is pointing out what is an inflection point for not only supply chain, but for the talent. The investment in technology is second to none right now in supply chain. There is very few investments that organizations are not willing to make in technological transformation right now. The challenge that we're seeing right now is that the over-reliance on technology from individuals, especially coming into supply chain, that don't critically think or are able to evaluate data. Data it's not a function of enough data. We've got more than sufficient data. It's being able to understand what the data is telling you and make forecasts or adjustments to your plans, especially today with the requirement of being as agile as you need to be. Very few plans stick for more than 6 months right now. When you talk to organizations about forecasting out, the time horizon has shrunk significantly. So what we're looking at is a really dangerous combination of over-reliance on technology with a lack of critical thinking for individuals, where they just accept information from the systems and say, here's what we need to do, as opposed to saying, wait a second, what is my experience telling me? What are my partners telling me? What are my vendors telling me? Being able to absorb information and then being able to help the organization plan accordingly is a hallmark of very effective supply chains. So what we're seeing and what we're hoping is that the investment in technology is matched with the investment in talent development, that you need to have both. It's not just technology that drives organizations. It's the use of that technology from competent and capable individuals. And this is where we're seeing a little bit of a gap in terms of investments for companies.
Thank you, Abe. Sorry, I lost a little bit of that at the end there because my internet just decided it wasn't going to play ball. So on the back of that, and Kim, before you have to dash, in terms of Abe's contribution there, talking about around this whole data thing. I mean, we've got, I think, more data than we know what to do with. How do we harvest it? How do we change it? How do we develop the skills and talent to be able to do that? Do we have it? What do we need to get it? What are your experiences, around that area and accessing it in order to add value to the supply chain?
Yeah, thanks, Abe. Yeah, really interesting perspectives from all of our panelists there, so thank you. Look, I hark back to this issue of just getting young people in and letting them cut loose and giving them width and depth. I'm a baby boomer, and so it's been a real challenge for me bringing some really, really young people into the organisation who really don't have much respect for people like me. Even though I pay the bills and I own the company globally, it's amazing the sort of stuff that they throw up. But I've had to. This is where employers have got to actually get and make their heads up and get involved and understand the mindset. We've got a global executive search business, which I've done 5 hours worth today around the world. And what I've learned is, I think it was Simon Sinek or Gary Vaynerchuk on TikTok was saying, coaches and baby boomers, get yourself a millennial coach. Get one. And I've got one.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, and you make some really, really good points and different points. He obviously just fell out in that conference. It was happening in the car. So Justin, I want to come back to you in terms of the youngsters? Because I imagine with what you're doing, there are a lot of youngsters that you take into the business, that you have working with you. So one of the things that is coming through is letting them loose, letting them go mad, bring their ideas and perspectives in. But how much free rein do you give them? Because I think the leaders, traditional leadership and the way things are done is going to have to change. In order to give them that leeway, in order for us to make quick turnaround decisions, like we've had to do now in these crises. We can't wait for a decision to go 10 layers up. It's got to happen now. So how much leeway do they go, and how many mistakes do you let them make before you reel them back in? How do you manage them in that type of situation?
I'm not sure yet, actually. I think we're still working it out. But my first thing I've learned is that I need to add Kim on TikTok and see what's happening there. I think that's the first thing that I've learned from the supply chain, which is great. But in all seriousness, I think how I like to run things in the businesses is autonomous business units, obviously, and the right people in that. And I think that there's that balance between the older individuals like myself, helping the sort of millennials, if I can call it like that, guide them in a certain process. But I think what's critical that's worked quite well for us is the view that is make a decision, even if it's the wrong decision, we'll fix it, but just make a decision. Is kind of like the mantra that we run at our business, which I'm not going to say is similar to Facebook and move quickly and break things, but what we've learned is through this disruption that's happened in supply chain now, our business has exploded because of that, and the ability to make some decisions, get some things wrong, and clean up the mess afterwards is almost more important than being stagnant and not being able to make a decision. So I think this inability to make a decision and through all the changes, because I think what Abe was talking about was quite critical around this. There's so much data. It's like data is not what we're looking for. We're looking for insights at the end of the day. And being able to question the insights that someone else has done. And I think they had a walkthrough with Elon Musk at SpaceX recently where he said, why do we do things the way we do things? Well, maybe there was some intern or someone else that came and defined that process years ago, and we haven't questioned it again. So I think starting from first principles and having some fresh blood in the organization is critical for us, and to be able to take those conversations that they have and not be so adverse to hearing them, I think is part of that sort of process. And I think what's critical for me if I was starting out looking for employment again is to find those individuals or to work for an organization that shares that sort of mantra or ethos. In other words, yes, we are to change, to bring about, and everyone can write that on the wall, change, adaptability, et cetera, That's bullshit. It's what actually happens at the coalface, I think, is the reality of it. And for us, doing new things, breaking things, and cleaning up the mess, I think is part of our process, which is what stood us in good stead during this sort of COVID and supply chain crisis at the moment. And I think that being honest about it with our customers is also critical, and not always having the answer, I think, has also been the thing that's served us quite well. So in other words, we said, we don't know, but I tell you what, we've got enough clever people to work this out, which I think is the way that we like to see things.
I'm just going to jump in. Thanks, Justin, because my battery's going to go down. I left the cable at home. But what I just want to say here is real time, real world about the employer side that Justin was just talking about. I had a case this morning where one of my young people, we gave her the first job to work on right the way through herself to place somebody in a role with a freight company. She screwed it up and it cost us $20,000 this morning. It's a big deal. My initial reaction was heat, but I stopped and I talked to a couple of the other players in the market and our team, and I went, you know what? This is the learning experience she needed to have. This is the learning experience that we as a business had to have. We need to give people the opportunity. She was in tears, and we had to really buck her up. She wanted to leave the job and everything else, and we just said, this is what happens when you're learning and you're going to become a superstar. And you know what? She's out tonight. She's having fun with her friends, and that's where we can go with young people, honestly, is give them the opportunity, because the time has never been.
Kim, I just want to give one, sorry to interject there, just give one example. I know, sorry for everyone for doing this. I think the interesting, the two parts that I took on board from that myself was when someone made a mistake, like a $20,000 mistake, and they ask if you're going to be fired, the answer is no, I've just spent $20,000 training you. Why would I fire you? Is the first comment there. And the other adage that I used always from a individual in South Africa that runs on a hotel group, he says that the old with, well, what if we train our staff and they leave? And I said, well, what happens if we don't and they stay? There you go. I mean, so those are the two things we hold.
Just to add in there as well, when I started as well, I made a lot of mistakes, and I'm sure it cost the company quite a lot of money. But I know as I've progressed in my career, I have made companies millions and millions of rands through my progressive and innovative thinking. So as we are learning, as we get into the field, as we learn, we are bound to make mistakes. We are not getting out of university perfect. We are not getting out of TVET colleges perfect. We're not getting out with an accreditation, an APICS accreditation perfect. We are still going to learn and make mistakes. But we learn from those mistakes and we make more money. I know I've made lots of money.
There is something to I think a position to be made about the preparedness of individuals. And I'm going to go back to LERATO's point. If you have a new driver, you're not going to give them the keys to the Ferrari. That would be very dangerous in terms of risk assessment, in terms of role responsibility. But I think we do have a different type of challenge, and that is the role model and the diversity that is in supply chain right now is not consistent with the diversity that's coming into supply chain right now. And I'm not just talking about gender or race or ethnicity. I'm talking about diversity of thought. Too often we're stuck in a lot of the heuristics and a lot of the plans that were developed years ago, to Justin's point about very few individuals question the foundation of the technology or the processes today, and they accept them. And this is where we need diversity of thought, and the role models that we have today need to step back. And, Kim was talking a little bit about reverse mentoring. Role models and mentoring and training goes both ways here because of the changes that are occurring in supply chain right now, using technology or processes that were effective 15 years ago. It's a recipe for disaster. You no longer have that capability to rely on those types of processes or technology. The systems and the environment is moving way too fast. So that diversity of thought, as well as the diversity of role models, mentors, needs to be a hallmark of organizations that are willing to assess and take the challenge for new individuals or green individuals. That safe environment to make the mistake. And I think all of us are, that's what we hope that we get into, creating that environment today from those senior supply chain professionals and organizations, I think is part of the challenge that we have today.
I think that Kim's point about the role reverse on the mentors, I really, really love that. And I think that we need to look at doing something like that. It actually boggles the brain when you really talk about it and people get really bent out of shape about people making mistakes. Our whole life and the way we learn is on mistakes. So why, when we go into the workplace, we expect it to be perfect and to perform things to what standard? To something that was set how many years ago? So if we're not challenging the status quo and we're not allowed to make mistakes as a way to learn lessons, then what are we doing? Because we're literally just shoving people into a box and saying, okay, do it this way, this is the way it's done, and don't try anything new. Because that's a recipe for disaster. How do we change the way that supply chain works and does and evolves if we're going to carry on with that? I mean, that's a very old way of doing things. And I don't think that the youngsters of today they don't accept that. I mean, my son always used to say to me, if I told him something, he'd say, but why? But why? And often I didn't have an answer to that question, but why? So, these... we need to start having answers for those questions. But why? We don't want to do things the same way we've always done them. We need to change it. What do we change it to? What is your suggestion? And invite those discussions instead of saying, this is how we do things, get on with it. We need to flip that and turn it around and say, this is what you got. What do you think about it?
And I think also what we also need to just be aware that we don't discredit the older generation. So there's a lot of knowledge that the older generation has, and I was once a person who sat at the conference, and Dr. Ian Barton came on and gave a presentation, and I remember he said, and I carry this with me everywhere I go. Right? He said that as young people, we need to be able to listen to what the older people have say as well. So also understanding, I mean, coming in fresh minded, you've got these great ideas and you want to know why. And someone says to you, that's not going to work. We've tried it before, it's not going to work. So instead of being discouraged and saying, well, they said it's not going to work, so I'm going to try it anyway, or I'm going to leave it. It's getting together and sitting with that person to understand his thought, his experience, what he practiced, how he got to that it's not going to work, so that you can find a way to make it work. So also merging, listening and hearing from older people will only improve how we innovate and we think going forward.
Thank you, LERATO. I really like your insights on that. Yeah, we've got to learn from we call the baby boomers. I probably sit in that area myself, I think. But there's also that challenge of that communication. So the baby boomers don't necessarily know how to communicate with these youngsters. And there's definitely a gap with that as well. But like you say, they are wise. They are the stalwarts of supply chain management. They have a great knowledge set. And just because something that they want to do didn't work, it doesn't mean that it can't be refined and executed, in a different way. So Justin is very quiet there. Let's jump over to him and just let him give some. How are we doing for time? Some last thoughts, I think, generally in the conversation. And what do you think? Taking away from this and moving forward, what does it look like?
I'm not sure why I'm being quiet the whole time, but that's fine. relatively speaking. No, I think it's, as I said, I come from a different space originally, getting into the supply chain part of things, and we've always been focusing on the tech component of it. And so for us, it's just interesting to be in this situation really where things are so tumultuous and there is so much change. We always feel like we've always been in that space. So I think for us, it's change, being used to change and things happening all the time have stood us in good stead. And coming back to the individuals qualifying now, I think that's something that they thrive on, and I think it's a critical thing that people live or acknowledge and get comfortable with change at the end of the day, and that's really something that we're seeing, and we embrace that. So I think it's I guess everyone's been speaking about all these adages and things over the course of this panel discussion, but it's I think the critical thing for me also is, like I said, it's easy to put it on the wall and say that this is what you stand for and this is your vision, your mission, etc., etc. And it's another thing to actually walk the talk. So I think that's the other part, and we have to look at ourselves constantly as leaders in these organizations and ask ourselves those same questions if we are walking the talk, or when someone suggests something that we think, oh no, it can't be done that way, it's to just rethink some of the capabilities or possibilities there.
Thank you. There are some comments in the chat here that really make for the state of our schooling system. And it's kind of, yeah, it's like the bane of my existence. My son's doing matric. He's not a happy camper. He doesn't like it, and the constant gripe and groan is Why do I have to do English? Who talks about Shakespeare anymore? And I can't agree with him more. And it's things that they do at school, and I just sit there and roll my eyes. I mean, sure, I've got to keep it quiet because he's got to finish, but I can't help but agree with him. The education system is so antiquated that what are we supposed to do with the kids when they come out of school? And I have to be honest, when we look at the university situation, it's not really that much better, because it's kind of a lead on from that. So one of the comments that's come through here is, in the schooling system, if we collaborate, we're told it's cheating, and there is only one way of doing things. Now, if this is what we're teaching our children, we are setting them up for failure, because they're kind of like these robotic kids have been programmed this way. We don't teach them to think and to challenge the way things are done, because then you're naughty, and you get punished. So how do we create these talented, vibrant youngsters that are hungry to bring change into the working world if this is what we're teaching them? Anybody got some thoughts on that? Because that really is something that gets me going.
Let me jump in here, Tonya, and I think that one of the challenges and benefits that we have within supply chain today is that we don't have a defined career path. If you ask me in finance what it takes to become a chief financial officer, I can give you the career trajectory. You get into the accounting, payables, receivables, you do some internal audit, you do some financial reporting, you manage the internal audit function, and then you're prepared to understand the complexity within the finance function. If you try to do that within supply chain, it's almost impossible, because the entry points and the exit points are multidimensional. You can come in through procurement, end up in warehousing, or end up in planning. You can come in through manufacturing and end up in reverse logistics. A lot of the challenges is that, what does a career path look like? So to your point in advising a young individual, generally I'd like to say, here are the skills that you need. Here's the educational foundation that you need. Here are the experiences that are going to lead you into a leadership role for supply chain. I can give you 10 different career paths for supply chain, which is fantastic, but it's also a challenge, because to define and to be able to explain to somebody, show me the steps necessary for me to be a successful contributor to my organization to make an impact. I can give you 5 different ways, which is really positive, but yet it requires that communication and collaboration to understand it's not intuitive. It's not, a lot of the functions that we have today are like engineering. There is no job called engineer. There's architectural engineers, there's civil engineers, there's industrial engineers, different types. There's no job called supply chain. There's procurement, there's logistics, there's planning, there's innovation, there's reverse logistics. There's no job called supply chain, but yet we talk about the supply chain industry and the wonderful opportunities that exist in it. This is our responsibility now to try to explain and to create that opportunity that's clear for individuals to say, oh, I see how and what I need to do and what information I need and what competencies I need. We need to do a much better job starting with school.
Sorry, my internet went off again. So in terms of the supply chain, absolutely. I mean, it's as deep as it is broad, and it's very difficult to say, okay, you go from here to here, because you come up this far and then change direction. But what's coming through now is that the technical skills are important, sure, but those softer skills are going to be leading the game. So that's what's going to be setting you aside. You know, you can learn the skills, but it's the attitude that you're coming up the stable with, and you learn the stuff as you go. So that also turns things on its head. So I think the way that we're going to be teaching people are going to be learning. It's changed forever. Of youngsters that are coming out of high school now, going into the working world, you know, they'll be setting the frontier for the rest of them. Well, I'm hoping so for the rest of them that are coming out that way. So, LERATO, comments from you.
Are these my closing comments? Are you telling me to close? Are you done with me for the day, Tonya? You're on mute. I can't hear you very well. Okay.
There I go with the
So,
mute button again. No.
yes. Okay. So I just wanna just close, if Tonya's asking me to close, by saying this. One is that supply chain is itself, as Abe has said, is not a job. We don't do supply chain as a job. There are many facets to supply chain. Supply chain to me is the most intricate, most interesting, because there's so many things within supply chain that you can do. So you get the technical knowledge. So you do go to school. You know, you must at least back it up with something. So that's the message I want to send out there, is that you do need to study. There are basics. There are basics that you would need to know. There are terminologies that you need to know. There is a language that supply chain practitioners and professionals speak that you want to be involved with in the community. So you get those technical skills. You do get yourself a mentor. You get yourself somebody who's going to guide you, who's going to be with you, who's going to help you challenge yourself in order for you to move forward. You are going to be hungry. So when we talk about hunger, and I was thinking about it after a session earlier this morning, when we talk about people need to be hungry, it means you must really want it. And if you want something, you're going to chase for it. So you're going to get into the workplace, and that skill of persistency, being persistent, being persevering. You know, if somebody's going to say to you, no, it's fine. You don't need to learn this. You are going to go and say, no, I don't need to learn this, but I would love to learn it. So that is chasing. That is showing hunger. That is you not giving up. And those are skills that we cannot teach people. I'm a facilitator, I'm an instructor, but I can't teach people to be hungry. I cannot teach people to want something. That is something that needs to come from young people, more in particular. And we're getting to a point where, you know, there is a radical change, not just around the world, but if I look at specifically in South Africa, we are going through a lot of change. We are getting, you know, we've got our elections coming up very soon. We're going through a lot of change, and young people are going to have to fight for that change. So you are going to have to fight for what you want in your career as you go forward. But supply chain as a whole, for me, is an industry that is open, ready, and waiting for us, waiting for you people to get in. Governments don't know how to run supply chains. You are going to run those supply chains. Our politicians, I'm being very political, forgive me. Our politicians don't know how to run supply chains. Your skills are needed in government, not just in health, in education, because we need to teach, as Tonya mentioned, we need to teach supply chain. And for me, supply chain shouldn't just be taught in varsity. It must be taught from primary school, even up into high school. And that's where there's opportunities for young people. So let's look at different ways in which we can add value using our skills. Use your bubbly personalities, use your quiet personalities, use yourself as a skill, use LERATO the skill to move yourself forward. And I just want to encourage you and say, you know what, we've got this. We are going to transform this world, this whole universe, by just using our supply chain knowledge and bringing supply chain into the fort. Thank you everybody for listening.
LERATO, you're amazing. How could anybody not want to be in supply chain management with that much passion? Okay, so Justin, on to you now for a couple of wrap-up words on the back of that. You've got a hard act to follow there after that.
Yeah, I don't intend to compete, so it's fine. I think there's a lot's been said here today, and from our side of things, I think it's really just about breadth of skills rather than hyper focus or hyper specialization is key for me. And the more you know about disparate things that you think are not interconnected, just to talk to your story about history, it's that the skill of bringing together disconnected things into a single vision or point of view is what is really needed a lot of the time. So when kids talk about history not being relevant. I think it's more relevant than people realize. And I think that talks to lots of other components or areas of life and business. I think that's what grey hair is about at the end of the day, and experience is seeing lots of different things and being able to pull those together. And the quicker that people can sort of get onto the page and start doing those things, I think that's something that we look for on our side. Sorry, my kids are getting home.
Thank you. Over to you, Abe.
Thank you, Tonya. And first, I'd like to say ditto to everything LERATO said, because it is the foundation of the future. I think we also need to put things in perspective here. Prior to the pandemic, we had a very efficient supply chain. We had high variety, reasonable cost, rapid delivery. Very few individuals really understood or challenged supply chains. It met consumer and patients' expectations. It's not now. What we didn't prepare for was just in case. The various scenarios, the various disruptions have really rocked our world, and a lot of the foundation that Justin and LERATO and Kim were talking about in terms of heuristics and in terms of processes and being able to be agile and responsive, that's the definition of supply chains today, is the ability to understand and revise and be agile enough to respond to changes for consumer and patients' demands. And they are changing. E-commerce has taken on a life of its own within supply chain today, and expectations still are low cost, high variety, rapid delivery. That has not changed for consumers. What's changed is how we as supply chain professionals need to respond to those changes, whether a shift in demand or a shift in supply. If you want to be in a dynamic, impactful job and to make a difference in the world, supply chain is where you need to be. To that question from that musician, I can't think of a better example than an orchestra for supply chain. And who is the supply chain professional? The orchestra leader. Because what he has to do is ensure that everybody understands their role, know when to come in, know when to come out, know when to play your note, and when to support and when to lead. That's a supply chain professional, is coordinating all these activities to make beautiful music, and that's what supply chain professionals do. Lastly, if you want to make a difference, be prepared, be competent, and be capable. You will enable your organizations to be successful. Successful organizations improve economies, and economies improve lives. We can connect what supply chain professionals do to improving people's lives. And that's what this is all about. It really is about making a difference in people's lives. And that's what supply chains do.
Conductor Abe, nice.
That was just fantastic. That was also very heartfelt. These last nuggets of wisdom and advice that have come out in the last few minutes are, and you can see that these people are passionate about what they do. When they really get going, you can see it comes from the heart. And this has been a really, really awesome panel discussion with incredible panelists, a very diverse group of people with very different insights and thoughts on the topic. But I think that the message is very clear, youngsters. There's a great role for you. Supply chain management is absolutely incredible. It's the place to be. Go forth. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to show up, make a mistake here or there. That's how you learn. That's how you grow and make a difference to supply chain. Like Abe says, it's everything. It makes the world go round. You know, everything that we do and we touch every day involves supply chain management. So thank you guys for your time. It was really, really wonderful having you here. And I look forward to another discussion around this because I think there's lots to be said, but really, really good insights. And I'm really grateful for your time. So thank you very, very much.
All the best.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, panelists. Thanks, Tonya.
Big round of applause for them. They've been absolutely incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Slow clap. Thank you very much, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.